Hi guys, so I've been getting a lot of questions on my comments and in my inbox about how I do my pastry dough. So I decided what better way to tell you guys than to show you. And since I'm a visual learner, I thought it would be best to show you how I do mine and what works for me. So welcome to what might be one of my many baking tutorials. I hope you enjoy. If you have any questions, please feel free to inbox me or comment. Anyone is good. So let me wash my hands, grab my ingredients, and I'll be right back. All right, so welcome back, guys. I washed my hands and I grabbed everything that I'll need for this dough. So for this dough, I'll be using my Crisco vegetable shortening. I'll need a half cup of this, and then I'll also be using unsalted butter. So you'll need unsalted butter, about 2 tablespoons of that, and then we're going to be using all-purpose flour. So to start, I'll measure 2 cups of my all-purpose flour. So you want to make sure that you measure it exact, so you know your dough will be good. And I always sift my ingredients. I feel like when I sift my ingredients, my bakes tend to be a lot better than if I just pour the flour in. I think the clumps, getting rid of all that clumps helps with your bake. So that's just what works for me. I tend to always sift my dough. So that's 1 cup, and then now we're gonna add the other one. I'll sift that into my food processor. You can do this in a regular bowl. You can mix this yourself in a regular bowl. That's fine also. I just find that since my husband bought me the food processor and I used it, my dough comes out a little better, because with this pastry dough, you have to make sure that your ingredients are really cold. So handling this with your hands tend to soften the butter, which isn't good for this kind of dough. It kind of gives you like a tough dough, and it's not flaky or soft enough for your pastries. I learned that works for me. So I tend not to handle the dough as much with my hand, because the warmth of my hand tends to melt the butter or makes the water a little too warm. So next I'm gonna add a half cup of my shortening. So I'm gonna grab a spoon and I'm just gonna spoon this out. And I just need a half cup of this. I use 2 full cups of all-purpose flour. And now I need a half cup of my shortening. This dough gave me about 6 to 7 of my pine tarts, but this dough can also be used for some other pastry, maybe like beef patties or something, or sausage rolls. That's also fine. So I just want to scrape it off, make sure it's exactly half a cup of my shortening. So I'm just gonna put that in there, just like that, in my food processor. Again, you can do this in a regular bowl. If I was you, in order for me not to handle it that much, I'd probably get like a pastry cutter, or maybe like use a fork. That's fine as well. And now I need 2 tablespoons of my butter. So I'm gonna cut 2 tablespoons of this off, and I'm gonna dice that 2 tablespoons. And again, your butter needs to be extremely cold. That also helps a lot with making this the best pastry dough. I'm just gonna like slice this up so it mixes in really well inside of my flour. So that's what I'm gonna do. And as you can see, this is like really cold because I'm able to cut through it. So I'm gonna do that, and I'm just going to pulse this a little. That way it looks like breadcrumbs. So I'm just gonna start low. Oh, I didn't even plug in my machine. Wow. So I'll just plug this in. Yes, honey. That's my daughter. Being very needy, of course. Sorry about that. So I'll just plug this in, and I'll start by this on low. Again, you can use your pastry cutter, and you can put this in a regular bowl, and you can use a pastry cutter to cut this in. The goal is to get this to look like breadcrumbs. So because I used my food processor, I don't have to do this too long. So I want to show you what it's supposed to look like. Of course, I'm going to pulse it a little more. So as you can see, it's starting to look like breadcrumbs. So I'm going to pulse this just a little more to make sure all the butter and the shortening is in there and it's nice, worked in really nice. So I'm going to go on my high now. this is what it should look like after you've added your shortening and your butter. It should look like breadcrumbs. Again, like I said, you can put this in a regular mixing bowl. You can do this yourself. This is just your goal. I would try not to handle it too much with my hands, so mix as needed. Now I'm going to grab some really cold water. That way, and you cannot use warm water, because the warm water will melt the butter and the shortening, and you do not want that, because you'll end up with a really bad dough. So just let me grab my ice water and I'll be right back. So I just grabbed the whole bottle of water from the fridge, and I'm going to measure about 4 tablespoons of this. I'll probably need some more, but I'm going to start with 4 tablespoons. That's 3. And that's my 4th one. And I'm just going to mix this again. You can use your hand for this as well. You just try not to handle it too much to melt the butter. Not quite what I want, but it's almost there. Not quite what I want, but it's almost there. So I'm gonna add about 2 more tablespoons just to get that to form that dough. As you can see, I'm new to this processor, but I'll get there. I'm just gonna add about 2 more tablespoons, just to make sure that it forms a nice dough. Not too soft, not too dry. So this should do it. That should be it. And like I said, you can use your hand. I just find that when I use my hand, I tend to melt the butter and everything, so it doesn't look like this. So for my next step, I'll put this in a saran wrap, and I'll be right back and I'll show you how I'll do that. Okay, so I'm back, guys. So I just cleared my counter, and then I just added some saran wrap. With the saran wrap, I'm going to turn my dough onto it. Try to get all of that out. Again, you guys can do this with your hands. I just find that this works better for me, and since I have a food processor, I mean, why not? So now I'm just going to kind of like make this into a nice ball, so I just get all the dough together into one. So I'm just gonna make this in a nice, grab all my dough together so my butter and my shortening is nice in there, and this feels so good. So I know for sure this will be some good pastry dough. And then I'm going to wrap that with my saran wrap, probably about 1 time. Yeah, that should do it. I'm just gonna rip that off, put that there, and then I'm just gonna press this down into kind of like a square. You can double these ingredients and you can get more dough out of it. I just find it's easier when I work with less, and I don't need that much pastries in this house anyway. So yeah, this is kind of about it. So now I'm going to put this in the fridge for about an hour, and I'm going to let this sit so the butter and the shortening can work in perfectly into this dough, so you get that nice fake flaky crust on your pastry. So I'm gonna put this in the fridge, and I'm gonna let it sit for at least an hour. You can let it sit overnight. I find it works really well if it sits overnight, so that's also an option. But of course, if you're in a rush like I was yesterday and you need to get it done right then and there, you have to put it in the fridge for it to get chilled for at least an hour. So that's it, guys. Nice pastry dough.